So we're actually going to have a reading, a blessing now for all the mothers by Linda Susan Ulrich. For all the mothers and mother figures, the grandmothers, aunts, and extended family members who mother, the soon-to-be mothers, the wish they were mothers, the never wanted to be mothers, the it's complicated mothers, the birth mothers, foster mothers, adoptive mothers, stepmothers, the used to be dad mothers and more than one mom mothers, the single mothers, separated mothers, stay-at-home mothers, unhoused mothers, the grieving mothers, those who grieve their mothers, and those whose grief is complex. For all the communities that mother, and for all who depend on the Great Mother, you are held and beloved. Now is our time in our service, which, as we know, has become more and more important in the last few months, our lifting up of our joys and our sorrows. And so in this time, please let us know so go down and press the chat button, and you can type your joys and sorrows. Let us know what is on your heart and mind. And while Bennett plays hymn 21 for the beauty of the earth, you can add your joys and sorrows in the chat box. I will then be able to read them in our community and light our candles. Now is our time for our deepest joys and our deepest sorrows. Thank you all for Howard Milky says, congratulations, Alicia, on her journey back into being a teacher at New Harmony School. Congratulations. We'll light a candle there. And I also want to give a big joy and thank you to Alicia Cook for this summer. She has joined our worship ministry to help us continue to provide music throughout the summer through our Zoom worships. Thank you so very much. It is this community that brings us together. So pleased to have such strong women and mothers in our family. I'll let him get away with it this time. That is from my father. Thank you, Dad. Our niece, Al Malone writes, our niece Hannah Knox, who was married online the first day we had online services, has just announced that she is pregnant. We are looking forward to having another precious rugrat in a family. That's wonderful. Cynthia is grateful to see her mama today on Zoom. Well, hello, greetings to you. This says it's from Darcy wrote, I believe this is from Dion DeVille. I'm sorry for those like me whose relationship with their mother is complicated enough to make Mother's Day a tough holiday. Everyone remember that you never have to prove love. Very true. Take good care of yourselves today and be gentle on you. Thank you, Dion. Carol Chapman says, Jim and Shirley, it is great to see you. It is such a joy to see you. Laura Carmen, so sorry to think of services without Bennett, and so grateful for the joy and peace his music has brought us. Lysadell Green writes that her cat is not allowed outside, got outside, but we caught her. Hey, I like that. That is a joy. And as Darcy, my mother writes, as Darcy's mother, I want to thank all the members of this congregation for taking such good care of our daughter. I second that. Thank you. Carol writes, it was a joy to be able to video visit with my daughter Jenny and her partner David in Houston and to know that they are well. Emma's Garden writes, happy Mother's Day to all who mother, and a special thank you to all who have been a part of the abundance of mothering in my own life. Carol writes, Bennett, all I can say is that I love you. Michael Platzer, hello Michael, says that I am grateful for this enforced detention on a small desert island off Africa in the Atlantic, together with my wife and the friendship and support of Darcy for the Coalition of Faith Organizations in Vienna, Austria. It is good, so good to see you virtually, Michael, and happy belated birthday to you. Sally Jackson writes of the joy of getting to sing in the choir with such a wonderful teacher and friend. And finally, Jim Vanderweel, hello, Reverend Jim, writes, joyful for Darcy's presence at CCUU, joyful for Bennett's musical leadership, joyful for the joy that comes from being back in Louisiana. I light these candles today for all the incredible joys that we have shared in our community, for our care and love for each other. I also light a candle in knowing that there is sorrow, especially in the joy. So let us remember too that in our lives, we will always carry both. And if we are lucky, we will know that we are loved and cared for by those that are closest to us, those in our community, and one day, perhaps, we may bring that greater love to our larger world. I also want to light a candle for Professor Ed Stevens, a longtime former member who passed away on May 7th from complications of acute leukemia. Ed and his wife Cheryl were active members of CCUU for many years. We will be talking a bit about him in our sermon today, but I want to light a candle for the death of Ahmaud Arbery in February and the justice that we haven't seen until hopefully this week. Finally, also, I want to light a candle for the death of Little Richard, who brought joy and flamboyancy and music to this world and influenced everyone from James Brown to Prince. And I have found out a little known fact that he recorded his most famous song, Tutti Frutti, here in New Orleans. So for all the joys and all the sorrows, we light these candles. Our next reading is from Toni Morrison and Motherhood, Politics of the Heart. For Toni Morrison, there was something so valuable about what happened when one became a mother. For me, it was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me. Liberating because the demands that children make are not the demands of a normal other. The children's demands on me were things that nobody ever asked me to do. To be a good manager, to have a sense of humor, to deliver something that somebody could use. And they were not interested in all the things that other people were interested in, like what I was wearing, or if I was sensual. Somehow all of the baggage that I had accumulated as a person about what was valuable just fell away. I could not only be me, whatever that was, but somebody actually needed me to be that. If you listen to your children, somehow you are able to free yourself from baggage and vanity and all sorts of things and deliver a better self, one that you like. The person that was in me that I liked best was the one my children seemed to want. So Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. Now you are our people, and you help make us a church. We want to thank you for all that you bring. And in this time, we want to thank you for all the time and talent and, yes, treasure that you bring. So we ask virtually that you give to Community Church Unitarian Universalist as you are able. We thank you for these gifts. You will see in our chat box how to give. You can go to ccuunola.org/stewardship. You can now give by text at 504-370-2659. Text GIVE to be prompted to make your donation. And you can go online as well, or you can send us a check the old-fashioned way. It works. To CCUU at 6690 Fleur-de-Lis Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70124. Bennett will now play our offertory at this time. We thank you. Our final reading is a Sikh, also pronounced Sikh prayer for America on November 9th, 2016. after the presidential election by Valerie Carr. Wahaguru ji ka khalsa, Wahaguru ji ka fateh. In our tears and agony, we hold our children close and confront the truth. The future is dark, but my faith dares me to ask, what if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country still waiting to be born? What if the story of America is one long labor? What if all the mothers who came before us, who survived genocide and occupation, slavery and Jim Crow, racism and xenophobia and Islamophobia, political oppression and sexual assault, are standing behind us now, whispering in our ear, "You are brave"? What if this is our great contraction before we birth a new future? Remember the wisdom of the midwife. Breathe, she says, then push. Now it is time to breathe, but soon it will be time to push. Soon it will be time to fight for those we love. Muslim father, Sikh son, trans daughter, indigenous brother, immigrant sister, white worker, the poor and forgotten, and the ones who cast their vote out of resentment and fear. Let us make an oath to fight for the soul of America, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be. Langston Hughes. With revolutionary love and relentless optimism. And so I pray this Sikh prayer. Nanak Nam Shardi Kala, Terabani Sarbat Dabala. In the name of the divine, within us and around us, we find everlasting optimism. Within your will, may there be grace for all humanity. Wahaguru ji ka khalsa, Wahaguru ji ka fateh. So, at 38 and a half weeks pregnant, a mother already, and a ministerial activist for reproductive rights, health, and justice, I should be the logical choice for a UU Mother's Day sermon, right? But can I admit something? For a long time, I rejected preaching on Mother's Day. I didn't want to be pigeonholed by my gender or biological abilities. And quite frankly, I was sick of hearing well-meaning male colleagues tell me, even before I gave birth, that I was the best choice to preach instead of them on this day. But then Mother's Day changed for me. As many of you know, I suffered an ectopic pregnancy near Mother's Day 2018, when the hospital's inability to believe my pain led to my near death, loss of a fallopian tube, and a whole lot of trauma. Mother's Day took on a sorrowful sheen. Yet 2 years later, I find myself here today, a fierce and changed Mother's Day advocate. And the change had far less to do with what was growing in my womb. Instead, what was growing, like in our Sikh poem actually, in the darkness of the tomb, the sadness of my experience. Because after Mother's Day 2018, not only did I become more empathetic to other women's plights, from pregnancy loss to loss of mothers' lives, particularly Black women, who have the highest maternal mortality rate in the nation, I also became radicalized. It was not having a child that led me closer toward what I have come to define as mothering activism. A type of activism that can be activated, no matter your biological gender or background. An embodied care and empathy that leads to fierce and unapologetic leadership. I recognize too that my perspective was so very narrow for so very long. To see needs beyond my own, healthcare inequities, racism, classism in our larger systems, that is a form of mothering activism. Now, for those of us who have raised children, consider all the ways you need to begin to anticipate and understand another person's needs. How intimately connected you are to their survival. And consider if you began to truly feel that pull toward not only your own children, but other people, the larger world, the interconnected web of which we are all a part. But listen, my mothering activism revelations are not new. They are embedded, in fact, with the radical, yes, Unitarian woman, Julia Ward Howe, who first wrote her Mother's Day proclamation in 1870. What got this all started? It was a call to establish a Mother's Day peace after a brutal civil war. It read in part, "Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a General Congress of Women, without limit of nationality, may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient, and at the earliest period, consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace." So guess what? Mother's Day was initially a giant protest or gathering call. And these protests came to fruition 3 years later in 18 cities across the United States. And I think that context is key here. This initial call was 1870. Our country was blood-soaked. Many mothers had lost beloved family members, husbands, children in the Civil War, the greatest conflict our nation had ever seen. Many of these women had become radicalized by pain, had become mothering activists, not only in the memory of their own children, but in hope for a more peaceful world for all people. Now, this origin of Mother's Day is wildly different than the Hallmark card holiday that some prescribe to today. There are cards that you can buy at your local Walgreens. Please wear a mask. And I know none of you would actually buy these cards that say, I kid you not, MILF, Mommy is hot, and I love you loads, which reminds me, will you do my laundry? Somehow, I can't imagine poet and activist Julia Ward Howe receiving these cards with any distinct pleasure. But Howe had actually already faced her disappointment about Mother's Day. Her vision of a mother, women-led social justice movement around peace activism had fizzled out after those first protests by that very next year. As she wrote in her autobiography, "The ladies were not much interested in my scheme of a worldwide protest of women against the cruelties of war." Now, who can say necessarily why the movement slowed? Perhaps it was like the disappointment of Kor, the rock creature in the movie Thor Ragnarok, who tried to start a revolution, but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone showed up. More realistically, though, it may have been that the farther away from that brutal conflict, the radicalization, the urge to make a more permanent and lasting change to our system became too hard or didn't feel as urgent as it once was. And I suppose that too is a tenet of mothering activism. Get used to some disappointment. We still cannot consider a woman as a viable presidential candidate in this country. Even as we see across the world, the ways in which many women leaders, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, for example, are leading their countries with mothering activism during a pandemic. Empathy, concern for others, a calm and reasoned understanding of data that translates into sound policy. But some mothering activists of the 1800s stayed committed. Julia Ward Howe, for example, spent her life as a Unitarian advocating for abolition, peace, the right for women to vote, as well as the questioning of normative gender roles. Howe kept both her pain and her hope close to her at all times, making her vulnerable and outspoken. And like any good mothering activist, she remained open to new ways of seeing the world. Her story of how she came to write the Mother's Day Peace Proclamation speaks to this openness. Years before her proclamation, Julia Ward Howe actually wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic, a rousing patriotic song in support of the Union's participation in the Civil War. After working in hospitals during the conflict, seeing and experiencing so much death, Howe, while remaining true to her abolitionist roots, became radicalized to pacifism. Of course, there are also those folks too who by their very bodies cannot forget or choose to uncenter mothering activism in their lives. The end of this month marks the anniversary of Sojourner Truth's famous "Ain't I a Woman" speech at the 1851 Ohio Rights Women's Convention. In it, Sojourner, a formerly enslaved person who became a preacher, abolitionist, and women's rights advocate, asked the primarily white woman audience to recognize an essential piece of mothering activism, that it must include us all, not just our own narrow experience. As Sojourner said, "That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me the best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out in my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?" In this last week, outrage has been fomenting around the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, a Black man in Georgia who was brutally shot in February by two white men, one a former police officer, for the crime of jogging. The two assailants had not been charged until a video surfaced this week of the murder itself. Truth be told, my attention had not been focused on this case. I hardly knew about it. But many Black activists had been advocating for months. Their embodied mothering activism was not heard until the video was presented, until it became centered in more people's understandings. And that is the work that many of us need to do as mothering activists, to not only see all individuals as worthy of advocacy, justice, and equity, but to feel it, to need it to happen. As singer Ella Baker wrote in 1964, words that are just as prescient today: "Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of white mother's son, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until that happens." So how can we all, regardless of gender or biology or age, aspire to mothering activism? Well, we must give mothering activism its due. Now, I know you don't need me to give you a Harvard Business Review study to understand this, but I'm going to give you one just in case. In this study, they found that there are, while not biological, culturally conditioned ways that many women lead differently than men. Ways that women's leadership qualities have often proven more successful, particularly in this time with the coronavirus pandemic, than traditional male styles of leadership. For example, women are more likely to lead through inspiration, transforming people's attitudes and beliefs and aligning people with meaning and purpose, rather than systems of punishment and reward. This transformational leadership has proven longer lasting and more inclusive. Women also culturally empathize more. The Prime Minister of Norway, Erna Solberg, recently held a children's-only press conference about the coronavirus. She helped answer these kids' questions calmly and in a way that they could understand, which was a relief both to the kids and to their parents. Can you imagine if we did that in this country? And because women often have to prove themselves more than men, we do not have a false sense of competency. Turned on its head, one could say we're not always as confident. That has meant that women tend to prepare more for situations and recognize others' expertise, collaborating more often. Traits that has been apparent, as mentioned, in the leadership of German Chancellor Angela Merkel and New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who have kept both their COVID-19 death tolls low. And finally, women tend to exhibit more humility. As Harvard Business Review notes, it is essential and also very hard for anyone in charge to acknowledge their mistakes, learn from experience, take into account other people's perspectives, and be willing to change and get better. But isn't that exactly what we want from our leaders, our mothering activists, our faith community, and our larger society? Isn't that what we all desperately need in this time? Again, and do hear me, all of us have some mothering activism in us. We should be proud of that. If I was preaching on Father's Day, I would have some fathering activism for y'all as well. Honoring one group is not about dishonoring another. And if we truly honor mothers, let's honor mothering activism. Equal pay for equal work, advocating beyond our own small world and needs, living out our values of an interconnected web of which we are a part, supporting families of different sizes, shapes, and backgrounds. If that is the type of families and mothering activism that you want to see, I urge you to explore the Strong Families Network, which is made up of over 200 organizations committed to ensuring that all families have the rights, recognition, and resources that they need to thrive. From reproductive justice to immigrant rights to universal pre-K. It's linked in your Zoombot chat box now. Now, to all the awesome mothers who have children today, I recognize too, especially with the misogyny in our world, that some of us mothers worry that we'll be erased. Our mothers will be erased if we broaden our scope around what a mother is. But if we continue to make mothering activism something to which we all aspire, we are opening up the tent for more folks, more ideas, more perspectives to come in, collaboratively and collectively. And as mothers, I think we have some great on-the-job experience already. Finally, we teach our children well about who we are, where they came from, thank you our whole lives, comprehensive UU sexuality education, and what we do as mothers. Recently, my son, who attends a liberal Christian school, came to me and said, "Mom, I'm told that Jesus made me, but I know it was you." I'm not going to debate him on that one, especially as I stand here almost 39 weeks pregnant. And as I stand here, nervous and excited about bringing new life into this chaotic world, grateful to have time with my new son, and already missing the wonderful congregants at Community Church who have loved and supported me, I recognize the power that both mothering and mothering activism have brought into my life, the womb and the tomb, the beautiful and the sorrowful. And for every man, woman, non-gender identifying individual, you are or can be a mothering activist. Empathetic, collaborative, fierce beyond measure. But first, think of the womb and the tomb in your own lives. What sorrowful experience, times of trial have shaped you And from this, what are you birthing into this broken world today? In this birthing activism, honor your mother, those that shaped us, whether biological or not, by recognizing her power and the power in you. We can all bring the radical care of faith and hope and creation into a world that is crying out for our love. Amen. Our benediction today is from William Stafford. Many things in the world have already happened. You can go back and tell about them. They are part of what we own as we speed along through the white sky. But many things in the world haven't yet happened. You help them by thinking and writing and acting. Where they begin, you greet them or stop them. You come along and sustain new things. To this community who has sustained so many new things and has sustained the past and looking towards the future, I love you, I will miss you, and I look forward to the day when we will see each other again, virtually and then in person. Until then, you are loved, and this community is here for you. Amen. And I'm back again after that, simply to say thank you again. And please know that we will now be moving into coffee hour. There'll be about a 10-minute break. It's simply Dion and us will mute ourselves and turn off our video, but then Dion will be coming back in about 10-15 minutes. So I think that's around 12:10 for the rest of our coffee hour. And I know I have to let go, but just one more time. Thank you all. I love you, and I'll miss you.
Stand up. Can be over before you can get in there.